Hello, Ellen.
Well, hello, Trevor.
Here we are again, back at the table for Yard to Table. It's another episode of Yard to Table.
I know. How are you feeling about this journey that we're on?
I'm loving it. I think this is exactly what we needed. I think that this is a great way to share with everybody how much we are renewed by our yard and the things that are going on in our yard and our neighbors' yards. It's yard central over here.
Totally. And I think, as we were walking down to the office and I was walking through the garden.
Yes.
And it's an absolutely fabulous, gorgeous New England day.
It is amazing
here
outside.
in Connecticut. Deep breath and
It is.
just full
It is your deep
happiness.
breath. It is another place of zen.
It is. And I'm also excited because we have our first guest today.
Oh, first
We
guest.
have our first guest today.
Very nice. This is the inaugural first guest. I know who the guest is, and you know who the guest is.
I do.
Listeners, you don't know who the guest is, but we'll tell you in a second. But this is very appropriate to have this person be our first guest.
Absolutely. And as we continue on at the table here on the podcast, you're going to meet lots of people that have made such a significant impact on us personally in this journey here in Connecticut. And I couldn't be more excited to introduce our first guest today. She's a cook, an educator, a writer, a researcher who's passionate about promoting and honoring kosher eating. She's an avid supporter of local farms and provides her readers with information on where to find seasonally grown organic food and more. She is a force in our community that unites like-minded eaters, not all kosher, not all vegetarian, who, in her words, want to eat thoughtfully prepared, properly grown, and ethically sourced, delicious food. I mean, who's not on board for that?
We all are.
Oh, we all are. So welcome to the table, our dear friend, fellow yard enthusiast, and founder of Kosher Like Me, Liz Rueven.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here.
Liz Rueven is
We
here
couldn't
with
be
us.
more excited. We could not be more excited because, we met in a yard.
You were like our first real friend in Weston.
We were cocktail party friends.
We were.
Yes.
And so Ellen and I had recently moved to this wonderful place
Yes.
that we are in Western Connecticut. And we were looking around trying to get more information about our local food scene and our local farmers and found this very lovely little farm called Dirt Road Farm.
Dirt Road Farm.
Right down the road from us, literally walking distance from us, which
On a dirt road.
we had no idea it was there. And we got tickets to this amazing event and met two of the most loveliest people
Yes.
ever, Liz Rueven, her husband Moni, and we started talking.
I think
amazing.
it was really very immediate for us, when we were, well, we'll let you tell it, Liz, but I know what my thoughts are.
Well, I know we couldn't stop talking.
Yes.
That's true.
And not only were we talking, but we were wandering through Phoebe Cole Smith's garden. We were nibbling on the most incredible food, all of which she had grown in her garden. And it was her grand finale at Dirt Road
That's right.
Farm before
That's
she
right.
moved on to Chappaquiddick,
Right.
where she's now doing amazing things, as she always does.
Dirt Road Cottage now.
Yeah, Dirt Road Cottage. Great name. Yeah. Way to brand. Keep the branding.
That's right.
But we immediately were in sync. We were walking and talking and nibbling and where are you from and what do you do? And we just had lots in common immediately. It was beautiful. Yeah,
It really was. And we're like, when are we doing this again?
And that's the fun part because
exactly.
it all happened in a yard.
It did.
It all happened around somebody that was growing something. And it was for us really the first experience of seeing here all of these people, because it wasn't just the four of us that were at this party. It was full of people that all were connecting over this amazing place. It was so cool.
It was really a gathering of like-minded people.
Yes.
So whether some of them were just simply enthusiastic locavores and they were great at eating, which,
Locavore.
most of us are.
Mhm.
Or there were some growers, there were some chefs, there were some cooks, there were some writers, there were people in the news world, but everyone was local.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about this community. If you dig deeply, and I know that you have, and I hope that you'll be covering that in subsequent podcasts. But
Definitely.
when you dig deeply into this community, and I would call this community the Weston and Westport, Connecticut communities, you know, there's a huge amount of farming history. It's burgeoning now. It's developing. We have an amazing farmers market. We have town farms that are community hubs in both of these communities. And so I think what you saw at that beautiful farm dinner that night was lots of people connected in those worlds.
Yes. And I think you just hit on everything that excites us about this local scene. And I know what excites you. We have a question that we thought we'd start to with our guests that, I know that you'll appreciate, before we get into anything else. What's going on in your yard right now?
Well, it is a jungle. It is a jungle, and we are trying to tame her, but she does not want to be tamed. And that's part of the story is, it's been a very hot summer here in Connecticut. We have had huge rainstorms. Yes, we're frightened about the heat and the intensity of the storms. Separate subject, of course, but we're all thinking about it. But we're growing cucumbers for the first time, and the cucumbers are out of control. I mean, we are laughing because we're finding cucumbers growing on vines that are trailing on the pavement. Well, that's not pavement; it's bluestone.
Let's set the scene.
The asphalt.
Yeah,
that
no,
is
there's
surrounding
no
your property.
Yeah, no, it's bluestone as it should be. But things are growing like crazy. We have cucumbers. I only bought the pickling variety, but we have a couple of different pickling varieties, which means that when you pick them, they've got these very prickly skins.
Little thorns.
Yeah. So we're scraping them before we eat them, which was a little surprising to me. I mean, the garden is full of surprises. We're growing nasturtium, which has come in really handy because now that the greens, we were growing a ton of salad greens. Mm-hmm. The greens are over. They're like, enough with this heat.
Yes,
so so they peter out as they're meant to. And now we're into eating nasturtium leaves and stems, which have strong flavor of arugula.
It was one of the most surprising things, I think, for me in the garden, just the interesting flavors that you get from things that you don't expect.
Agree.
And nasturtium was one of those lightning bolt flavors for me that not only are you looking at a beautiful plant, beautiful orange flowers, yellow flowers, red flowers, but you've got this amazing peppery after flavor that just blows you away.
And fully edible.
And
every part of it.
I know the flower, the leaves. I mean, it is such a powerhouse vegetable. And last year, for the first time, Trevor made nasturtium cookies, which I think we shared with you. Did we share some with you?
They were delicious.
I don't think you did, but if you're doing that again, I would love to help.
Well,
we would love that.
We need to know if we actually gave her, because now she's sad that she doesn't have
so
them.
sad.
She's so sad.
I know, especially because what did you bring us talking about your cucumbers? What did you bring us today?
So my husband really loves pickling. He loves pickling everything. So we're pickling our homegrown cucumbers at this time. And that's lacto fermentation. So that's a completely natural process. That's the stuff where it's really helping your gut. So if you drink that juice, which is really stinky, garlicky, salty, cloudy, it's not a sexy juice.
I love it though.
It's really good. And so we're making our own pickles. We're doing it like crazy on our porch. It's simply very, very clean jars, very clean cucumbers, garlic that we grow and harvest like you do.
Yes.
Some fresh dill, which we grow, and water and salt. And we put it in clean jars and we put it out on the porch and it gets sun. And within a couple of days, and we're shaking it in between, just inverting the jar gently, not shaking it. And then we look at it and we say, is that cloudy enough? Have they turned sour enough? Because we want it pretty sour. And some people, we've experimented with some jalapeno. I don't love that because I'm not going for the spice lately. But for a class I just taught, I did pickled red onions. And this area was full of onion farms, by the way.
Oh, yeah,
It is our history here.
Of course, you know that.
Yes, and we're going to do a podcast about that. We might have to have you back.
Amazing. Well, I know people who know a lot about that, so I'd be happy to participate. But I can refer people to you. So I just taught a class, and we can talk about that later if you want. But in that class, I taught it was adults at Le Chat Farm here in Weston, and I suggested that they throw in other things into their pickled onions. So if you want to make those pickled onions even more Barbie fuchsia, even brighter pink, I threw in bits of watermelon.
I love that combination.
Now, pickled watermelon is a revelation. Really, I learned about it from my father-in-law, but you could throw in watermelon, blueberries. They could be frozen blueberries too, even raspberries, and you can really up the pink ante. And then you're biting into fruit that's pickled and your mind is really blown, which is a fun thing to do to your friends and guests.
I love it.
Which I love. I've heard about pickling watermelon rinds. I have heard about that in the past, but the fruit itself with the onion, that sounds delicious.
That sounds crazy.
That's a salad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over your nasturtium greens.
Which we are very lucky, by the way, because we also got a jar of Liz's pickled onions and watermelon. So we have the pickles and the onions and the watermelon pickling. I'm very happy. I'm already picturing lunch and I'm hungry. Now, Liz, you talked a little bit about Le Chat Farm and you talked about local farms. I think, tell us a little bit more about your relationship with the local farms. And I know, seasonal and local, those are things that are extremely important to you. They're important to us. But if you tell us a little bit more about your relationship with local farms and the connections with community.
Sure. Well, I think that we come from a farming history here in Connecticut. And during the pandemic, people, I think, finally understood the importance of the farms and the accessibility to seasonal ingredients that they could make part of their meals when they went to Whole Foods and the shelves were empty. And why were they empty? Because, trucks were not moving from California or Mexico to Connecticut. But aside from that, I really receive all of my inspiration from my local farms. So Le Chat Farm in Weston is a community hub in a very small town where your homestead is.
That's right.
I think it's 8,500 people here.
I've heard 10,000, but I've never seen them.
Still not a lot.
I've never seen 10,000 people at the one market in town or at the one little post office.
Correct.
Yes.
But Le Chat Farm, Wakeman Town Farm in Westport, and Westport Farmers Market are really hubs for me in my life. And I've gotten to know lots of farmers who work around helping and supporting those farms. Each of those places is very focused on not only providing local Connecticut goods, food, harvest, crops, but also in educating our residents. And every single person that we touch by educating them through a class or through conversation at a market means that local farmers will be more able to sustain themselves and survive in this very difficult time, economically and climatically, politically.
Yeah.
No, it's so critical. And, your participation in not only supporting them from going to the market, spreading the education around why those markets are important. But you, when it comes to the town farms, you're an educator, you're teaching. So you're literally teaching about these resources. And I know you just had a class last night you were mentioning, right? So you were teaching at Le Chat.
I did.
How did it go? And what else did you
teach?
What else did you, what brought people around the table there?
So it was so much fun. So I love teaching at both Le Chat in Weston and Wakeman in Westport. And sometimes I feel like I just don't need to go beyond these 5 miles or 7 miles because we have really open audiences. So I did a class called Bountiful Summer Salads, and I used the word bountiful, because of its double meaning. It's a very bountiful time of year in terms of harvest. We have a huge selection of ingredients. It's now mid-July, so it's really peak or almost peak. Our peak season really lasts for quite a while. And I want people to know that their salads should be bountiful. There should be lots of ingredients in them. If you're a vegetarian, if you're a kosher keeper, if you're vegan. I started the planning for that class just by researching exactly what would be harvested in mid-July around the date of my class. And
I love that.
yeah. And when we did the promo for that, I made sure to say, this menu could vary depending on what happens with the heat and the rain. I mean, this is the life of a farmer. I am not a farmer, but farmers just don't know exactly what's going to happen when. So we prepared 4 salads, hands-on. We had a sold-out class of 14 adults.
Love it.
And I made sure that it was vegan and gluten-free because it's very easy. Just like when you're kosher, all fruits and vegetables are vegan. They're all gluten-free and they're all kosher. So why not? So it was a sold-out class. And last time I did a class called Middle Eastern Dips and Spreads, really rooted in my passion for the flavors from that region. My husband is Israeli, so I've learned a lot about the foodways of that region, which is an enormous region, of course. That was a sold-out class, and then I repeat. Yeah,
2 sold-out classes, by the way.
She's a sellout.
Yeah, it's a sellout. So it was super fun, and the participants are just very excited. And I try not to wash the vegetables before the class. I mean, with the herbs and stuff, it's such a lot of work. So I try to get through some of that in advance of the class. But I wanted the carrots to look really, really dirty. I wanted the cabbage for a simple cabbage salad to have the dirt in the layers, not because people love to have grit in their teeth, but because I want them to know this is not coming from a shelf that has a sprinkler or a mister above it. This is coming from the earth, and it is dirty. And I think that's why those of us who eat this way are probably healthier, because not only has the food not traveled, we're eating a little bit of dirt. It's probably good for us. I don't know. I mean, there's been a lot of research on that.
A lot of studies. Yeah.
Yeah. So the class had 4 salads. We covered a lot. And in advance, I did the pickled onions, and I'm trying to remember what else. There was something else, but they at Le Chat, they want me to provide dessert, and I was just too wiped to bake. So I went to Need's Bakery, which is spelled Kneads, clever, so clever. And they've opened an ice cream shop, and I went there and got whatever they had that was made with local fruit. So they had a strawberry ice cream that was made with Connecticut strawberries. And they had a blueberry vegan sorbet. Oh, so sorry. The ice cream was not vegan. It was the only thing in the class that was not vegan, but the sorbet was, and that was made with blueberries from the Hudson Valley. So that sort of leads me into that other idea, which is, what is local? So we love to eat Connecticut grown, but it's really important also to support other farmers and producers. So if, I buy olive oil from a producer in California, yes, she's 3,000 miles away, but Global Gardens is growing their own olives. They're pressing their own olives into the most beautiful olive oils. So even though they are far away, it's a small business. So it's all sort of part of the whole gestalt of small business, small farms, local, yes, but that spirit can move out, even if it moves across the country.
Yeah, I mean, here in Connecticut, we have about, I think, 200 local farms. And we always try to get as much local here. If it's not coming out of the yard, it's we're going to all of our very local, within 5-10 mile radius farms and farmers markets. We just recently were up at the Ridgefield Farmers Market, and it was lovely and fantastic. And it's great because you also get to meet so many of the different providers, growers, and
makers,
and you get to see them again and again and again at the different markets. They'll go to Westport, then they'll go over to Ridgefield, they'll go to the other ones, and
it also shows you how hard they're working to sustain what they're doing.
Well, I always say, all you have to do is go strawberry or blueberry picking in order to understand why a pint of blueberries or strawberries costs what it does. And
Yes.
it's expensive. And I know that's part of the argument that people often say, to me about buying local and buying at a farmer's market. And it's true. But if one's budget is limited, you might just choose certain things that are very important to buy locally. I mean, there's nothing like the flavor of a locally picked fruit. Maybe that's the most important thing to you if you have limited budget. So, that's a whole other topic.
Visually, things are so homogenized in a grocery store. Every single piece of fruit looks the same with a 5-degree variance. And you're not really seeing how wide a range of fruit and vegetable and other grown products can be and still taste incredibly delicious and wonderful in the process.
And are really so much better for you in so many ways.
I taught a series to a group of 4 teens at my home, in my kitchen, over the course of 2 years. And it was really wonderful because I love working with teens. They're so open. And if you can just get to them mostly through their stomachs, I like to go through the research and help them to understand the bigger issues, but they love to eat. And we did a series of classes of, locally grown ingredients. And one of their favorite parts was going out to pick herbs from my patio. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was just so ho-hum. Who doesn't know how to, you know what basil leaves look like, right? But, and they were hesitant at first. They were like, Liz, is this correct? And where do I snip? Mm-hmm. And what do you think? Is this enough? And they always came in with not enough. They didn't come in with enough flavor. I'm like, we need flavor. We have tomatoes, we have beautiful olive oil. All you need is basil or another herb, and that's it. And that's the other thing, when you're using local ingredients, they shine. And my cooking is really about, and my teaching is really about letting those ingredients shine. We don't have to mask them. We just want them to shine.
I mean, just as staying on with the kids for a second, what were their thoughts about, because they're sort of the next generation of people that are going to be interested, hopefully, in sustainable agriculture and growing ultra local, yard to table. What are their thoughts about this? What was their experience in seeing how close you could get to produce and agriculture?
Well, that's a really great question. I taught a series of classes in global Jewish cuisine this over the course of this past year, and the kids really didn't know very much coming in. They really didn't know very much about culinary history, about cultural history, and certainly not a lot about farming and how close they can really get. And the only way they can do that, in my opinion, is if their parents grow at home, whether it's one pot of tomatoes and a second pot of basil or nasturtiums. I mean, you don't have to grow corn at home to know that the corn is grown locally. You can go and buy it. I'm not going to grow corn. It's too much.
No. I don't know. I say no. And then then I change my
mind.
And
then you're like, hey, what about this special corn that I've never seen before?
But I will say
no for now.
I will say that, one needs to grow something at home, whatever that is. And the other thing is, if their parents can seek out markets that happen over the weekend, they really, I hope, will take them to those farmers markets, because until they get out there, until they say things like, oh, I've never seen that fruit or vegetable before. What is that? Or, boy, it sure is hot. That farmer looks so hot. What do you, how do you think she's doing? And yes, please bring a cold drink to that farmer or that vendor who's helping, anyone. Yeah. But until they get to see the directness of farm to audience, they really can't understand. So, if at all possible, take those kids to a farmer's market or to a farm on a weekend. Lots of farms are open for pick your own or just to shop.
I think it's such an incredibly important point. We've seen that with our daughter, and I know a lot of parents face challenges around, what their kids are eating, what they can get their kids to eat. We are not, we have those struggles as well.
100%.
But it's interesting, once we get our daughter out to the garden or we go to a farmer's market, we sometimes can convince her to try things. We're not even, it's not with much convincing. We'll hold something up and
She'll give it a shot.
and that is,
because I do have a lot of trouble with the chicken finger plants do not produce as much as I thought they would. It's a shame.
or the
It is a
or the mac and cheese
The
plants.
mac and cheese plants also are challenging, but it is
those
true.
I can't grow.
We do definitely have a much wider range of options for her when she's presented with things. We grew ground cherries last year, and I was 100% convinced that she would not be interested in a ground cherry, and she loved it.
Well, one of the reasons ground cherries are so exciting is, first of all, they're both crisp and sweet.
Yes.
So that's a perfect combination. But also they have those beautiful little paper coverings, and they have to be, peeled back. And it's
like a present.
It's like a candy. It's like a little candy wrapper. It's a veggie candy.
It's so perfect.
Yeah.
It's so perfect. And speaking of ground cherries,
Yes.
Ellen and I just went to
our little adventure. That's right.
we went to a little adventure. I mean, I've known about Viv at Viv's Veggie Stand up on Lyons Plains in Weston for a very long time. But we went up the other day, and it was Ellen's first time, because you still are. You don't feel like newbies and you don't look like newbies, but you still are a little bit.
I know it is true that every day I'm amazed at what we don't know or haven't been to yet. So, and I always appreciate it because you always take me to the places that I need to see.
So great. But we went up to Viv's and we were like, do you have any ground cherries or ground cherry plants? Because we know that they're not ready to be harvested yet. And it was a very busy and very hot day for her. That woman took a spade, left her customers at the stand, and went into the field and dug up a couple of ground cherry plants for us, stuck them in a pot with a little bit of soil, and said, try this, just see what happens.
It was incredible.
And what I took home was, very meager and very weak looking. And I added more soil to the pot. I put it on my porch. I did not let it get the stormy rains.
Yeah.
I did not let it get too much sun, because she advised me that way. And those plants are looking fabulous.
Yeah,
and
they're
they
thriving.
are
Same.
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they are ready to go in the ground. So, ground cherries are amazing. Kids love them because it's a little present, but also it's, a little fruit, and it's very other. It's not an apple. It's kind of the opposite of an apple, and which is great. We love apples, but it's
like nasturtium. For me, it's another one of those sort of mind-blowing vegetable flavors where you're thinking it's one thing, and then in your mouth, this sort of produce alchemy occurs, and all of a sudden you have a totally different flavor, and it's sweet and it's tart, but it's both at the same time, and it's crisp, but it's still got that sort of uniqueness to it, and
That
it's
tangy sweetness. It's sort of
crazy.
indescribable in some ways.
It's a crazy thing.
And the other thing about them, which is super fun for kids, is you don't pick them, you wait for them to hit the ground.
That's right.
And then you collect them from the ground. So speak about dirt. Hey, we love that dirt.
The dirt is good.
The dirt is good. But
and kids love dirt, by the way. So,
but picking things off the ground is super fun.
totally. Yeah. And
As long as you know what it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to pick anything up and eat it. That can be a challenge.
And that's something that kids do like to do as
They
well.
do. They do. What is in your mouth? What is in your mouth?
Why are you eating that? Oh, okay. It's fine.
That's okay. That's okay. No, that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. And Liz has made me a promise that because we had more ground to plant ground cherries this year, when it's time for them, we're going to work on a tart together, right?
I love that idea.
Yeah.
What are we putting in that tart with the ground cherries?
Well, last year I made the tart with cherry tomatoes and ground cherries. And I think I shared that recipe with you and you gave me a couple fine tuning points. I don't know. I think, should we go sweet? Should we go savory? I think we try both.
Well, I'll tell you what I would do.
Tell me.
I would turn to some of my resources. And I think that's a very beautiful thing to have in your library. If there are a couple of books, I use a book called The Flavor Bible,
which you highly recommended to me. And it is the Flavor Bible, the essential guide to culinary creativity. And it is a gem.
It is a gem because they list tons and tons of ingredients, vegetables and fruits mostly, and they help you to understand the flavor profile of it and which flavors can pair with it. And they kind of, use text and print to highlight what's best with it and what might be worth experimenting with. But, if you want to make a tart and the season, time is running, you can turn to a book like that and it will help you to know which flavors to pair with it. Because I'm dying to know which herbs are going to go with ground cherries. And should we be pickling them? By the way, I don't know.
My head's going in a million directions right now. But that literally, the ground cherry tart conversation last year was what led you to the recommendation of the Flavor Bible. And I think, we do want to be talking about these recommendations on the podcast. And I know you have a very extensive library of cookbooks and culinary instructions and all of those good things. But, besides that, what are your essential books that you would recommend for new or experienced home cooks?
There are a lot of great books that came out this year, and I haven't been investing in them at this moment. I've just been very, very busy. I don't know, teaching has been really great this summer.
It's been a big year.
It's been great.
Yeah.
It's been really great. But, I love the Encyclopedia of Jewish Food by Gil Marks. I use this book all the time because, all holidays really should involve seasonal foods.
Mm-hmm.
So if, let's say, for the first of the fall series of holidays, which is Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the new year, apples and honey are often eaten. But when you do the research in Gil Marks's book, The Encyclopedia of Jewish Food, what you find out is that lots of other foods are symbolic. You find out why they're symbolic, and they come from other cultures that are outside of this, what we call Ashkenormative culture, which means the culture that I come from, where everyone was from Eastern Europe in my community. And so we call that, those of us who come from that region are called Ashkenazim, and Ashkenormative means that's the way we saw the world, through that lens. But when you use certain research tools, you find out that there are other symbolic foods beyond, let's say, apples and honey. And, good researchers and great food encyclopedias help me to understand what they are and then use them.
I think one of the things that I want we know, because we know you and we have a lot of friends that also keep kosher, but for some of our listeners out there that may not know exactly what it is, they've probably heard the term keeping kosher or something's kosher, but tell us a little bit more about what it actually means, where it comes from, and how it impacts your diet and what you bring to the table.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's often very mysterious for people. And the laws come from the Old Testament. The laws are extensive. Most people don't know the laws, even if they grew up like I did in a kosher home. My grandparents were kosher. My home is kosher. My daughter keeps a kosher home. The laws really have to do with foods that are considered, here are the air quotes, fit to eat. So certain...
She did do air quotes, by the way.
Did.
You can't see it out there, but
I do air quotes all the time on this podcast list. So, we'll just notify the listeners.
Right. So the lists of food are extensive, and they are actually listed in the Old Testament. And that's pretty incredible. So these laws of kosher have lasted and been honored for thousands of years. There are certain foods that are kosher by nature. So all vegetables and fruit, as we mentioned, all herbs are kosher. And that's incredible. And that's why so many kosher keepers, and that includes me, eat as vegetarians when we're away from our kosher kitchen. So it just means that we're just eating veg. Certain things are kosher by nature, like certain fish. And sometimes that helps us to determine where we vacation, because we want to make sure it's not a place where, let's say, the whole celebratory culture is around shellfish. Certain things are not kosher by nature, like shellfish and pig and other foods. And some foods are determined to be kosher depending on how they've been examined and slaughtered and whether they are, air quotes, fit to eat. So, and also we separate milk and meat. So in my kitchen, I have service for 12 in both dairy, that's pots, silverware, dishes of all sorts, and service for 12 in meat, air quotes, dairy and meat. So, if you came to my house, you really wouldn't know that it's a kosher home unless you wondered if the potatoes had been sauteed in bacon fat. And, no one comes around asking that. So, I'm shopping the farmer's market and growing food just like all of my friends. It's just that in our home, we have an awareness of the potential holiness of food. And it comes from these laws, which have been passed down. And when we eat out, instead of looking at a menu and it being everything is fair game, we look at the menu and we say, is there fish? And are there vegetarian dishes on this menu? And if so, we're comfortable eating those. And there are different degrees of kosher. So many people don't eat in restaurants that are not certified kosher. We do. So, different degrees, different strokes.
So do you think that keeping kosher for you helped to foster this interest, this love of ultra local growing? Do you think if you weren't kosher that you would have those same kinds of connection points? And I'm sure it's different for everybody, but just for you.
Yeah, it's a great question. I grew up going to a church parking lot with my mother in Westchester in New York State. And that's where we would buy locally grown things. The farmers were Amish. They were coming from a few hours away. And I don't recall my mother being particularly friendly or not friendly with them. So I would say it was kind of imbued in me. But my family didn't grow anything. My grandfather was a baker. There was a lot of baking going on.
Lots of arugula, lots of
onion rolls.
Onion rolls.
Onion rolls need to come back in a big way.
Oh my
gosh,
I
I
totally
love them.
agree with that.
I mean, I love babka as much as
Everybody likes babka. It's not a thing.
I mean,
it's almost becoming just ultra normative.
It's a meme.
Too much.
Yeah.
It's a meme.
It's a meme.
I'm looking for some onion rolls. Soft, doughy, moist, poppy seeds, onions. That's what I'm looking for.
I love that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay,
on
we're
all
in.
of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about growing up with going to places where farmers or local growers sold very informally. It was formal for them. They had to have a place to go and to sell. But I think about growing up in southern New Jersey, and we were really in the farm part of our state, right? So we had huge blueberry farms.
It is the garden state.
It is the garden
state. It's not the oil refinery state, as some seem to think. That's a very small portion of New Jersey.
So much
It's
flack.
hard. I know.
So
I
much
agree.
flack.
I agree.
I grew up by the ocean. I grew up in the southern part of the state. We had so many local farm stands to pick from. We knew who had the best corn. We knew who had the best tomatoes, a Jersey tomato. I can remember being so excited as a kid to get that tomato, slice it up, and put mayonnaise on white bread. That was living.
That is delicious.
So good. But, I think that a lot of those farms and what we've seen and what you spoke to before, it's hard for people, for small farms to keep that sustainability and to keep it profitable, to be able to. So, that's where I think the rise in farmers markets really have come to allow to have a more formalized way for these smaller growers to have a place to go. But, and I think it's really, again, to your point, and what we talk about is so important to support them because of that, because we need to sustain that. If we're not growing it ourselves, or we need supplements to things we grow. We didn't get any lettuce this year because we had a late planting because we were making the beds higher and we were putting in new soil. So we were really excited to be supporting our local farmers markets and growers and getting those types of things.
And I think that's the fun part about having a very local community of growers is that you're not going to grow everything. You're not going to, Liz, grow corn. You've said it. You've put down
I will not.
You've drawn the line at corn. That is it. Not going to happen.
I drive 3 miles up the road to Viv.
Yeah.
In Weston, and she does not grow corn either. She gets it from another farmer. So really,
What a chain.
It is a chain, and we are all connected. And until, as consumers, people understand the connectedness, they can't support their local economies the way they really need to. So you're supporting local economy. Someone once said to me, but Viv doesn't grow her corn. And I said, but she supports someone who grows the corn 20 miles from her.
Right.
So isn't that good enough for you? You no judgment, but you shop at Whole Foods.
Right.
And that's fine. You also shop at Stop and Shop, and that's fine because sometimes you need to buy, stuff that is in those
Windex.
places. Windex. Ooh, but yeah.
She's got a natural solution for you.
I'm sure she does, but sometimes you gotta clean a window.
Yeah. But the more we understand the connectedness, Ellen, you are so right. Then, if my ground cherries are happier than your ground cherries this year, we'll use mine in that tart.
That's
and
right.
if you need my books to figure out the flavor profiles that we should be exploring, we'll be sharing that, and we'll be sitting on the floor in my family room. So that's...
But I think it's also surprising that you don't realize how much sharing goes on in a local agricultural community like we have.
All you have to do is go on to Moms in Weston, the Facebook page, and someone wants to give away eggs.
Is that right?
That's true.
I need eggs right now.
You do?
Yeah.
We have so many eggs.
How many eggs do you want?
Well, you don't have chickens. I know that.
No, but our neighbor has chickens.
Okay.
And she brings us a lot of eggs. So
Love that.
If you need 18, you can walk out with 18 today.
Yeah, I could use 18.
Done.
Yeah.
Sold American.
Yeah.
But I think that, even in our earliest days, we have a lot of maple trees here. And we talked about Phoebe Cole-Smith and her husband, Mike. They had an amazing maple sugar bush that was right next to their house. They made amazing maple syrup. And Mike came over. I didn't know him.
Did you mean Sugar Shack? You said sugar bush.
It's a sugar bush.
It's a sugar bush?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. All right, sorry.
It's
Say
a
it
sugar
again.
bush.
What's
Okay.
a bush? Do you mean a bush as we know a bush?
You call a group of sugar maple trees a bush.
No way.
Yes,
See,
you do.
we just learned something.
Yes,
I tried
you
to
do.
correct him.
No, it's a
As I
sugar
do.
bush.
Well, that's how we learn.
It's marriage.
Out in the
too.
bush.
Yeah.
It's totally marriage.
You were out in the bush
Yeah,
just
that's what it's
around the
called.
corner.
That's what it's called. Yeah.
Amazing.
Good stuff. And Mike came over. I didn't know him really from anybody.
Well, you met him that
I
night.
met him that night when
Yeah.
we all met that same day, and he said, "Yeah, I'll come over and I'll take a look, see what you have," because we didn't really know all of what we have. We have 400 taps here. We have a lot of sugar maple, and he was so helpful.
Showed up,
and
just came.
giving.
I'm here.
and, Hey, yeah, he just drove up and hey, Mike, what's going on? I just came to look at your stuff. But that's just a little snapshot, a little microcosm of the larger group of all of us.
I think that because sometimes people ask me, like, how do you know all this? And I say, I speak, I talk,
Yes.
I ask questions. So speaking of one of the classes that I taught, I at the end of this class that I taught over 2 years to these 4 teens, we did a class on salad. And I didn't have a recipe. And we went to the farmer's market. And I said, let's talk about the elements of a delicious salad. So we started with greens and we went to one of the farmers and they kind of whispered to me and said, how do I know what that lettuce tastes like? Because let's say there were 5 or 6 greens. And I said, ask your farmer. Ask your farmer. And
Now,
if you ask
I
your
just
farmer.
want to pause on that real quick because that in itself is so critical, not just for kids, teens, but for adults. We are so afraid to ask such a simple question, don't you think? I
Absolutely.
mean, when you're in
What
an
does this
environment
taste like?
in a farmer's market, that's of course your farmer, your grower, your vendor wants you to know what that tastes like.
I insisted because they were feeling so shy.
Yeah.
And I said, you ask if you may taste a leaf from each of these heads of greens. And they were like, no, we can't, we shouldn't, we can't. And I said, why not? And the farmer was thrilled. Yeah, I had given her a heads up that I was bringing a class, but still, when you don't know if the green is going to be peppery or
Right.
mild or sweet.
Yeah,
I mean,
a little more on the bitter side. You don't know. Yeah.
Exactly. So I said, what do you like in a salad? And then, we built them out from there without a recipe, which
I
is
love this.
really the way I think most people cook. And if they can shop for beautiful ingredients the way we're talking about, or if they can grow them, there's really not that much to think about because, the adage, what grows together goes together is so true.
Yes.
We have cabbage growing like crazy mad right now. Not the sexy vegetable. I know it, but I love it. And
Delicious.
it's so good for your gut. And onions are coming up too.
Mhm.
And herbs are coming up too. And red peppers are coming up too. Why not toss them all in a big bowl and then start tasting? And that's what I was talking about in my class the other day when we were tasting olive oils and vinegars that come from my friend Theo at Global Gardens in California. And she sent me these beautiful flavored infused olive oils and vinegars, including a hibiscus vinegar that she's calling Barbie-licious, of course, because she's got a great sense of humor.
I love it.
And I said to everyone in my class, just take out teaspoons and we're going to start tasting. Is this olive oil bitter at the finish? And do you like it? It's not good or bad.
How did that go? What was the experience? Had anyone done anything like that before in the class? I mean, I'm sure you probably had some folks that were a little more experienced with that kind of tasting, but overall.
Yeah, it went pretty well, until you've done, let's say, a honey tasting. And we've done those with Marina at Red Bee right up the road, who's growing and producing and managing beautiful bees. Until you do a honey tasting or an olive oil tasting, people aren't quite sure about putting, a spoonful of vinegar or olive oil in their mouths. But most people have done wine tasting.
That's right.
And if you've done wine tasting, it's all the same. You want to look at it. And it's the same with shopping in a market. You look at the greens, smell them, taste them, see what it presents to you and let that inspire you. So yeah, it went pretty well. Some people are hesitant and some people are open,
I love that.
So speaking of people getting a much broader understanding, not just of olive oils, but of a lot of different things, you started Kosher Like Me. So tell us a little bit about how that started and about what you cover, and everybody should 100% immediately after listening to the podcast, of course, go to kosherlikeme.com and see all of Liz's amazing recipes and everything. But tell us a little.
Follow her on Instagram.
Follow everybody.
We're going to share all those links in the notes.
100%.
Thank you. Well, I've taken a break from blogging, but I have 12 years worth of content on the blog. So, whether it should be...
It's deep.
It's deep. And whether it should be turned into a book or not, I am still deliberating. But right now I'm really posting on Instagram. So, short blog posts like that, But when our youngest went off to college, we rented an apartment in New York City and we started spending 3 or 4 nights in the city. And unlike many people in Connecticut, we had never lived in the city. We had lived in Boston and we came here with our oldest child from Boston. So going into the city was pretty exciting. And I started to do research because we were there 3 or 4 nights. We started to do research about restaurants that had veg-friendly vibe because we were happy and we are happy to eat veg and fish in a restaurant. And yes, there are a large number of kosher restaurants in New York City, some of which I like, many of which I'm sorry to say I don't really like because I'm not a steak and potatoes kind of girl. But so I started doing a lot of research about restaurants, and people would say to me, "Oh, you went. Where are you eating in the city, and how do you know that it's appropriate for someone who's kosher like you?" And so I started writing about restaurants, and I really loved doing that. Because I would order like 6 dishes, and if I didn't have a friend to come and eat with me,
you were doing the tasting and the completion.
Yeah. Shout out to my girlfriend, Ilana Lichtenstein, who, God bless her, that woman knew how to eat and she would come with me whenever she could. But, I would go at 11:30 in the morning, just, when they would open lunch service, I would get a table by the window and I would order 6 dishes. I would lug a camera. It was all like a major schlep. So then I started shopping the markets in the city, Union Square Market and other markets, and was really happy to find product that I loved. I mean, I wasn't so sure about some of the farmers that were selling there. It seemed to me that some of them were not selling directly from their farms. And that's a whole other topic of conversation. But I loved discovering small businesses and products that were being sold at the markets. And so I started writing about restaurants, recipes. I really never wanted to be a recipe writer. It's not my most favorite thing to do. My most favorite thing to do is really to find out what the story is. What is the story behind a small business, a small producer, someone who's making tahini, or as we say it the proper way, tahina, Get it right down there in the throat.
Tahina.
Yeah. So, who's making...
Trevor's better.
Give it to me, Trevor.
Tahina.
You got it.
Yeah, I knew it. Go ahead.
Accents.
Accents.
Who's making tahini? Who's making jams? Who's making halva? Who's making...
I love halva.
Pickles. Oh, I have a recipe for you, Trevor.
I love it so much.
Oh, we can use that recipe if you want to post something.
I love it.
Yeah,
Why
I love
not?
it. I was actually going to talk about that recipe because I just revisited it last night.
Tell me.
Yeah. So, let me just finish for a
please.
second.
He's so excited.
I'm so excited.
I'm going to give it to you 1 sec. Hang on. So, anyway, I just started exploring more broadly. And listen, the word kosher is appropriate for some people to see, and it's welcoming. And for some people, it's a little polarizing. What I always wanted, and what Ellen put in her incredibly intuitive intro about me, is you don't have to be kosher, and you certainly don't have to be vegetarian. I am not, but I eat a lot of vegetarian. I am interested in thoughtful sourcing and in discovering stories and small business stories. So, I kind of cover the gamut, and I have an index on the website that hopefully will help you to sort through categories like salads versus breads and holidays, so that and that includes American holidays like Thanksgiving, because, it's not just Jewish holidays that we celebrate. It's certainly Thanksgiving, like most Americans. And when it's Thanksgiving, if you're making pumpkin pie, cool. If you see that there are Brussels sprouts growing on stalks that are 2 and 3 feet long in your market, cooler. Use them. I can help you with that. So, I just started writing more broadly, and I hope that it was an adventure for my readers, and I hope it still is on Instagram at Kosher Like Me, that, you never quite know what I'm going to be focusing on, but I try to let people know where my resources are so that they can live a more sustainable life also.
That's awesome.
Well, I think when you follow the journey on Kosher Like Me, that is such an integral part. You are so good at putting in what those resources are and really giving a lot of detail around the things that you're putting out there. And that's why I think it's so essential to follow, and what I follow along and use many things.
Thank you.
that you put out there.
Thank you.
Recipe. Let's get to it.
Oh, I knew he was going back to this.
Hit me.
Okay.
I have more questions, but let's get the recipe.
I want to do it.
Okay, so I looked it up. I'm going to reference it here in my notes. Okay, so one of the things that I really love to do is to collaborate with small producers, small businesses. My father was a small business owner, and he taught us the value of supporting small businesses from the time, I could walk and talk. So I love
It is literally America.
It is America, and finding small businesses that produce beautiful foods is easy. And some of them are on the shelves of your Whole Foods, but I would say go to your farmer's market and you'll really find some small producers that are doing some incredibly fantastic things. And, for the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, the head of the new year, usually in September, this year it's in October, we say never on, always early, always late, never on time. And that's the joke, because the Jewish holiday dates move around by a different calendar. We're like, oh my God, it's so late. Well, when is it on time? Anyway, so one year I was doing a collaboration with Seed and Mill, which is a tahini and halva producer at Chelsea Market. And they sell online also. It's female owned. Most of the businesses I really just fall for happen to be female owned, and I love supporting them. And one year I did a collaboration with them, and I wanted to come up with a dessert that was dairy free, so it could follow a meat meal, because we don't eat dairy in the same meal with meat. And I came up, I created a recipe that was an apple compote, because we love apples for that holiday, with honey and halva and tahini and dairy-free yogurt. And I made a parfait from that. And I have pictures. I might have to.
I'm literally tearing up right now. That sounds so good.
Well, if you love halva and, the creaminess of tahini in any kind of baked good is fantastic.
And again, that surprise, right, of something you think of as savory, I love that twist, to put it into something sweet. It just punches it up. It makes it more interesting. And it's such an incredible combo.
That's right. And people love layering things. If you have, I have some old-fashioned glasses from my mom. You layer these things in a glass and you've got like a dairy-free yogurt, an apple compote, which takes almost no effort to make, a light skim of tahini. Maybe you've mixed it. Well, yes, you have mixed it with some honey. You could throw in some bittersweet chocolate shavings, and you've got and you've got a layered dessert that it now incorporates some of the elements that we always ate traditionally for that holiday, mostly apples and honey, but in a completely new way, and in a way that is more globally. It speaks more to our global tastes at this time. And I don't dismiss a beautiful apple or honey cake. I serve them and I make them. It's just not my favorite. For whatever reason, it just doesn't feel like there's, unless you use really beautiful ground spices, which are easy to find, I like things that just have a more nuanced flavor, more interesting, and
I'm
texture.
Sure beautiful looking as well in that old
those
glass.
layers.
Of
but
course.
What I love about adding the halva in is that also and for those listeners that don't know or haven't had it before, it is got a very interesting consistency that's almost like a shortbready kind of a...
Ooh, I thought you were going to use the word that all halva sellers and producers hate, but it's so accurate. You go ahead and then...
What? What's the word?
Well, the word is chalky.
No, I don't say. I've never read it as a palate chalky.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been more chewy, and it's like ground cherries, like nasturtium. It's very hard to categorize.
That's right.
It's sesame based, and it's this wonderful sweet dessert. I think one of the things about parfaits so much, unless you're using like a granola or something that's really boring, it is a one-noted textural dish. But having that in, you're getting a little bit of more of that chewy sort of structure, and being able to layer it in with some of the other elements that are more traditionally parfait. That sounds fantastic.
Trevor, you are a great eater.
I have been known.
Yes.
I have been known to put something away every now and again.
And honestly, Liz, it gives us hope because evidently as a young child, not so much.
Bologna, hot dogs, cereal, mostly corn pops or Apple Jacks.
Yeah.
And mac and cheese. And that was essentially my entire palate.
It's hard for parents to have hope when the kids are young. It's really hard.
This story is my daily inspiration. And again, we joke around our child's eating and how we eat and what we expose her to and still what she sticks with. Right. But we know at some point the door will open.
It did for me.
Trevor's
so
proof
I'm hoping
in that.
It does for her.
They all grow up, as they say.
That's right.
Well, Liz, we've had so much fun talking to you. I have one more question. It's a big one. If you were going to cook your favorite meal to bring to the table, what would it be? Go.
It's a really big one.
Go, hit us.
I'm really thinking for some reason, about the fall, because although we're in peak season right now, there are certain things, that happen between summer and fall that are quite magical. And one of the most magical moments for me was when I learned about Brussels sprout leaves.
Brussels sprout leaves.
Yeah, Brussels sprout leaves. When you're at a farmer's market, especially in the Northeast, but probably in all sorts of places here in this country, you'll see the large, 2 or 3 foot long stalks of Brussels sprouts. Attached are the Brussels sprouts as we know them, the ones that we love to roast and get crispy. Believe it or not, those are called nubs.
Nubs.
Yeah.
Love the nubs.
And then there are leaves at the top, and it kind of looks like hair or a crown. And not that they're hairy, but they look like a crown. And those leaves are easier to manage than cabbage if you want to roll them and stuff them. So, and they also are not as stinky as the nubs, which is so interesting. So there's a little bit of...
It's a little more mild.
They're mild.
Okay.
Yeah. And they're pliable. So, they're kind of like people that you love.
I love that analogy.
A little bit more mild in spirit, a little bit
more pliable.
And so if you
I feel like I want to hug,
Brussels sprout leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some farmers now gather them in a pile.
Mm-hmm.
So you can buy them like that. And then just, it's so much fun to walk around the rest of the market and to find out what else is out there. So, chop up some kale if you find it, chop up some end of season tomatoes, boil up some simple brown rice, make a vegetarian stuffing. I have a recipe for this on Kosher Like Me. Roll them, make a sauce. I have that there for you. And I love a slow cooker. What can I say? I think a slow cooker is one of the best things in the world.
Agreed.
So I would say people love that. And they're always surprised by that. So is that my most favorite? My most favorite at the moment, really stereotypical, is chicken soup, only because my grandchildren love it more than anything in the world.
Well, that's a wonderful reason.
Yeah. So, I have lots of great food that I love, but that's a fun one, especially for the fall.
I love it because I think one of the things we always find so much fun is the impress your friends and family game, because you always have these weird, unique foods that you're trying and you're growing and you're trying to figure it out, and you find this really cool dish and then you put it in front of people. They're like, oh, you made this, you grew this, this came from. It's so much fun to do that.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, I think this has just been a delightful time.
It could go on forever.
And it will, because I will be seeing her after this.
That's very true.
Which I hope to as much as I possibly can.
We've taken up so much of your time. We so appreciate you coming to our table, hanging out with us. And
I'm so excited about your podcast. I have to say, I think that this is a fantastic thing. And you two are the perfect hosts.
You're so sweet.
Perfect.
Thank you
hosts.
so much.
Oh, thank you.
We appreciate it.
We appreciate you, and so much love to you and your family. And we can't wait to be around the table with you again.
Love you guys.
Love you too.
And that's how we do it. That was it.
Oh my gosh, that was so much fun.
That was so cool.
Oh, I love
Liz is the best. She's so
I
much
love me
fun.
some Liz Rueven. That was epic first guest interview.
Epic. Totally epic.
Well, I know there was a lot of information that we talked about.
I'm going to have to go back and re-listen again.
And again.
And again.
And again.
And again.
But you listeners will get all of the notes in the podcast notes of what we talked about today. Recipes and links to Kosher Like Me.
Books, all the books we talked about.
Suggested books, all that other good stuff. So please take a look and start your journey.
That's right. And we'll see you next time around the table at Yard to Table.
Can't wait.
Yard to Table is a production of Macrocosm Entertainment. Don't forget to rate us and subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts. And for tips and more information, follow us on Instagram at Stonebrook House.